ladies and gentlemen, our guest,
What's going on, man?
Donald Trump Jr.
How are
How are
you?
you?
Doing
Good
well
to see you.
yourself? Where do you guys
Walking
want
in. What's going on, man?
Oh, keeping busy.
Yeah, I
Keeping
bet.
busy. It's been a while.
We didn't have anyone come up and do anything. They didn't tell us how you were coming in. All of a sudden, you're just here. We figured there'd be like security stuff, but there was nothing.
Yeah, now that you're the president's son, there was first of all, I don't know if you visited the men's room, but we're pretty sure, and I don't know if you've seen it, Jim, but like a day or two ago.
They closed up the hole Sam drilled.
I know, it was really a bummer.
Yeah.
They
It was so much easier than just using a urinal, right?
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
go right through the wall.
they added little rugs under the urinals and citrus-smelling like urinal cakes. And we were talking about it, like, why would they just add this all of a sudden? And we're pretty sure it's because they knew you were coming.
I'm pretty sure that's not the case.
You don't think so?
I'm going to go with a hard no on that one. But
Because they've been talking all over. They're like, oh, we don't know. Is Secret Service going to come? Is there going to be a security detail a week in advance, a day in advance?
putting a rug under a urinal is less than awesome idea.
They wanted
I just
it to
say
feel
this to someone
fancy.
from the hospitality. It is pretty fancy. There's
Yeah.
nothing like holding that smell. Wow.
I thought the same thing. I was like, the drips are just going to be there forever. But they said, no, this is an upscale move, Roberts. You wouldn't understand.
High end.
By the
Yeah.
way, I got your book yesterday. They sent me a digital copy. I've only read like 50 pages because it was embargoed. Yeah. But it's really funny. Like I was surprised. I laughed out loud on the plane at some of the. It's sarcastic, and every point you make, whether people agree with it or not, some I agree with, some I didn't. It was still funny, and it's like I don't know how anybody is not going to enjoy reading this.
Well, listen, I think that's the idea. Is man, you know better than anyone, frankly, with sort of today's outrage culture. I mean, your job as a comedian, it's so limited in terms of what you can say, and I think I just point out some of these things. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I've known you guys for a while, coming back in the O&A days and stuff like that, and you used to be able to have some fun, and you just watch sort of the restrictions coming on what you can and can't say. I mean, I still get canceled on a daily basis for stuff that I said with you guys.
Uh-huh.
Like I don't know. Like we were promoting a reality show. That doesn't mean that that should be held against me in the court of public opinion for the next 50 years when we're obviously joking around, having a good time, and
It really is funny. I think your dad, Trump becoming president, kind of sent a shockwave through the cancel culture kind of way of thinking, because there was all this tape and there was all these quote unquote career-ending horrible mistakes you can never come back from. And it was like, we got him here, we got him here, we got him here. And then when he wins the election, they go, wait, that's not how this is supposed to work.
Well, I think it's twofold. I mean, first of all, yes, I think the average guy is sort of sick of this stuff. I mean, Chappelle did a sort of a good job calling it out, recently and some of these things. But like some of his greatest skits, like, I can't even say what they are because then, oh my God, you're.
And by the way, they were on cable.
Yeah. Well, some of his greatest skits, not that long ago. I feel like it wasn't that long ago, early 2000s, whatever. When I was in college, like, were some of the funniest things ever. But like, if you did that today, it'd be over.
The opening sketch where he played the Black Klansman, not knowing the dude.
The black white supremacist was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
Like,
and you could never do it now.
you could never even contemplate it. And so I think people were sick of it. But more importantly, I think my father also handled, and I say outrage in sort of air quotes.
Right.
He handled it differently in that he didn't just go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'll never. It's like, give me a break, and moves on. And I think, the guys that do end up sort of getting canceled are the guys that just start profusely apologizing, because the reality is, and again, regardless of sort of political spectrum, it seems like the people pushing that outrage culture, it's never enough.
Right,
The
right.
apology is never real, even if it is. You can never repent enough to get back in their good graces, and it goes across the entire spectrum. I mean, one of the examples I do use in the book is like sort of the Martina Navratilova, the tennis player. Like, this is someone we knew growing up. Like, she has a similar story to my mother, escaping communist Czechoslovakia and stuff like that. And, she came out a few weeks ago against like the trans women in female sports.
Right.
Which I've been pretty vocal about, and it's one of the few things I can put on Twitter, and people are like, crap. I hate Don Jr. But I'm with him on this one. I can't believe I'm agreeing with him on something.
What do you say about it?
What? I just say it's a little bit ridiculous. As the father of girls who are athletic at girl sports, as someone who's watched sort of the movement of Title IX and everything, it's like just to totally negate it. Because it'd be one thing if there were trans men dominating men's sports, but it's really only working one
by
way,
the way,
guys.
that was
It's
a
insanity. And
great
so I call
point.
it out, and I'm not afraid to sort of call it out. This is a woman who was one of the great female athletes of all time. She was also like literally leading the charge for the LGBT community for 40 years. I mean, she's a lesbian, very active in this thing. She was, a proponent for those things, 35 years before it was cool. And when she said that, her own side just literally tried to destroy her, to cancel her, to this. So much so, I mean, she had to start walking it back. Now, this is a woman who is a professional athlete. She gets it. She understands the differences and was like, I don't know. I don't necessarily think this is fair or right. And she gets so destroyed that she has to walk it back, jeopardized 40 years of being an activist for these things. And then like 3 weeks later, she has to start coming out and hitting Trump because that's the only way to get back in their good graces.
Right.
Like,
Well, that's
it's so insane.
the point you made too about, because as a fan of the trans community, which I certainly am, but you're right about the athletics because there are no trans men dominating male sports.
I think
It's just you're born
Well,
with
and by
male
the way,
ligaments,
like-
male muscle structure, bone structure. You can't.
There are
compete in this sport.
biological
It's not right.
components.
It's
And in
unfair.
high school, like there's not even this sort of testosterone requirement.
Right.
Like it's not right. And again, dude, I'm from New York. I have plenty of gay friends. I could care less. Like I'm like the most live and let live conservative there is. But there are limitations, and that's the point: is that you can never be woke enough. You can never, you can be totally accepting. I mean, I could care less how someone identifies. It makes absolutely no difference to me. For me, happy people are productive people. Productive people move society forward. But it's now we need to take the next chunk. Now we need to take that next bite. Now we got to take it further, and there never seems to be an end.
Did you see what President Obama just said about cancel culture?
Yeah,
And it's really interesting because it's very similar to what you're saying, where you think of Navratilova, and I said it,
Who?
Martina. You think of
close enough. He's obviously a homophobe because you can't get the name right.
I
mean, that
mispronounced
makes
the
you a
name. That's
terrible person.
violence. That's not good.
True. And
Sam,
he's
you're
very
in trouble,
very,
Sam.
This is bad. But he said, like, you have to understand, like, there are people who might say something here that doesn't take away from, like you were saying, 40 years
Correct.
of what they were doing.
Listen,
and taking
I
it into
appreciate
account.
the point that he made. I appreciate the point that Ellen made 2 weeks ago, where it was like, you're gonna tell me who I can and can't be friends with. Now I'm not gonna say that those people also weren't perhaps people throwing some fuel on the fire throughout the years. I mean, I think we can say that, but that's the point. You can take it to a certain level, but then the culture is to just keep going. I mean, like I said, the goalposts never seem to stop moving to justify whatever it
But
is.
so
that
is there a part of you that when you hear Obama say that, you go, oh, this is refreshing.
It is.
Yeah.
I wish it would have probably happened years ago, as opposed to now when when we've hit a point where it's crazy. And like I said, I'm from New York City. I have plenty of liberal friends. I have plenty of this. And again, I'll take the political side because it's sort of the nature of my life these days. But like, I used to be able to argue a lot of their points, and when I see the debates, when I see the liberal debates, I mean, they literally spent more time talking about Donald Trump's Twitter account last time and like essentially eliminate the president of the United States, free speech, than they did addressing China. Like, that's a problem, guys. Like, this is, I say this, 'cause I travel the country and, because of my hobbies and everything like that, I sort of have a pretty good, understanding of middle America, understanding the full irony that I am still the son of a billionaire from New York City. So I have to say that, today I'm not allowed to have an opinion. I'm certainly not allowed to state that opinion. I can't state it aggressively because that, I would be canceled. But like, I think we get it. And, I try to talk about it a lot in the book, which is, again, I had a mother that escaped communism.
Right.
I grew up spending summers with my grandfather, who was a blue-collar electrician from communist Czechoslovakia, in Czechoslovakia. He sort of had that convo with my father and just said, what you have here in this country is incredible. You have to see the other side. And so I've waited in those breadlines that everyone thinks are so wonderful, like not so great. Like, so, for me, I've become much more, active in this as I see sort of that trend toward where socialism, communism, it's like a mainstream thing on the other side. It's no longer a fringe element. It's actually a party platform almost. And I still have my 93-year-old grandmother, who's not exactly a normal 93-year-old grandmother from the U.S. I mean, this is a woman who spent her early 20s hiding in the basement of her farmhouse for 2 years from the Nazis. Then lived under communist occupation, and she'll she'll call me and we're having this conversation. She sees CNN, over there in what's now the Czech Republic, because that's all they get. And it's like, Don, you don't understand. Like, it always sounds so good on paper. Everything's great. Everything's for free. Everything's this. You don't and this is a woman, again, who's been through a lot in her life and, has real life experiences. And she's sitting there on the phone in tears for fear, like, of me being her grandchildren and her,
living under that system.
My kids, her great-grandchildren living under that system. Because she's like, been there, We were sold this bill of goods before. It never works that way, and it never stops.
But do you think there's a realistic threat that we would ever not be a capitalist country?
Listen, I see the attacks. I see it being normalized, and that's, I think, her point, which is it always starts off here.
I see.
But the slippery slope never seems to stop. When you see sort of the indoctrination in academia from a young age, I mean, I see it with, my kids in school and, what they're being pushed and what they're being taught. And I always said, and when I'm out there even speaking about, that system versus ours, or, I say, what's interesting, the Democrats, they could get some people to talk about some pretty amazing. How come there's not one person? And maybe one, Jim, but name one person who's lived under those systems. Meaning, name one person from former, like, Eastern Bloc Europe. One person from today's communist China. Like, bring it closer to home. Like, one person from Venezuela who's like, no, let's bring that shit here.
Right. It's always the idea, idealizing the free stuff or the idea of free stuff.
No one who's actually lived under these systems is here saying, no, we need that here.
Well,
it's only in theory. If anything, those people are like, no. Like my grandmother, they're saying, go to Southern Florida, speak to some people from Venezuela.
Right.
Like,
that's why they're in Florida, by the way.
Correct.
Right. No one is fighting to get to Venezuela.
The boats only go one way, guys.
Right.
I wanted to ask you too. Your dad has a very, really a bad relationship with the press, back and forth.
Yeah.
What do you think was the point of no return for that? Like, what happened where it was like, this is never going to turn around. This is only going to be a fight. Like, even Bush at times had some moments of calmness with them, or this seems like this is never going to change. What do you think was the turning point?
Honestly, I think it's just an accumulation, right? When you see, don't forget, the mainstream press gave him a lot of press early on not because they liked him. They gave him a lot of attention because they thought he'd be the easiest one for Hillary to win, to beat. Like,
and he supplied great TV and ratings,
some good soundbites, some good material in
yeah.
there for sure. But like, that was the genesis of it, and then you could see sort of just the one-sided attacks. And honestly, the mainstream media has done themselves the biggest disservice. I mean, I talk about it a lot in the book, but I feel like I could write 3 more volumes just every day. I mean, just look at this weekend, right? The Washington Post, right?
Mm-hmm.
Democracy dies in darkness. Yeah, bullshit. Al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, a guy that's literally burned journalists alive, a guy that's thrown homosexuals off of buildings, a guy that's killed women Christian missionaries, who's literally led ISIS for decades. He is, and I quote, an austere religious scholar who just liked watching soccer. But a kid like Nick Sandmann, right, who's a 15-year-old kid, the Covington Catholic kid, right? 15-year-old kid.
Is he the kid that was yelling at the protest? Is that
No. He didn't do anything.
No. Oh, yeah. The staring kid. But we're talking about the same kid.
He stood there, but he had the audacity of being a white kid who's Christian
from
Kentucky and a MAGA hat, which is like the holy grail of left wing. Like, we got him. They needed to destroy this kid. So that kid's a quote-unquote homegrown terrorist for standing his ground against a guy getting in his face who's a stolen valor, fake war veteran. Like, that guy's a homegrown terrorist. So it never ends, man. So they're trying so hard to backfill the narrative that they want. And honestly, I think they're doing a disservice. Frankly, I think they're making my job easier. When people are like, well, what's the most compelling thing? I was like, just listen to the other side.
Right.
Just listen to what they're trying to do. I mean, imagine any reasonable person in this day and age in America or any other time prior to that in this country where they'd be willing to destroy a 15-year-old kid for their political objective. Look at what they did to Kavanaugh, right? I mean, obviously the guy is such a serial rapist that the second he got confirmed, we don't hear about those things anymore. Now you see the women are coming, well, it wasn't really true. Yeah, no shit. It wasn't really true. But the media heard what they wanted to hear. And they just decided to run with it because they don't even have the pretense of being objective anymore. They are just the marketing wing of the Democrat Party.
Is that the 24-hour news cycle that all of a sudden they became so clickbaitish and everybody has to get the story first to get it first? But it really does seem like they're not even pretending to not. Like everyone knows Fox leans conservative and the rest of the press leans.
Yeah.
People are criticizing when they gave a thing about your father. They said Trump mentions peace or something. The New York Times put the headline. They actually changed the headline because it wasn't anti-Trump enough,
Correct.
and people were threatening to cancel the paper.
Well, and that's the point. And I think you're right. I think it has to do with the news cycle. Listen, I don't think it's any secret that mainstream media has been left-leaning, just like academia has been left-leaning for a long time. But they've eliminated the notion of objectivity as a pretense. I mean, honestly, like just go to yesterday. Like my father put up the meme of the dog, like it's literally a joke meme.
Yeah.
And the New York Times goes, they're fact checking it to see if this was real. I mean, I'm sitting there being like, you can literally see where it was like cut and paste in Photoshop, but they have to go out there and do this to try to be like, oh, we got you. It's like, guys, like it wasn't serious. I mean,
have there been times where, and like life has obviously changed, and I think that this is why your family situation is so unique, because there have been very few presidents that were such public figures before this. So like your dad was on Twitter way before he was president. Your dad was, I mean,
Yeah.
this has been something that he's been doing. You were a public figure way before any of this. Like you've been a public figure your entire adult life. Have there been any tweets that your dad has put out where you're like, Dad, you're the president now. I'm not even saying you're wrong, but maybe we don't tweet this like this anymore.
I've never been asked that question, Sam. That's interesting. No, listen. Of course.
Yeah.
And just like I've gotten the call, like, hey, this is the White House operator. The president would like to speak to you. You're getting a little hot.
Really?
And it's like, yeah, of course.
Your father said that to you about Twitter?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm like, this
You
is
gotta
the
use
one
this responsibly,
place
Junior.
I will take your advice on business. This is the one place. Maybe we're just gonna, it took me 41 years to sort of realize I was probably a lot more like my father than I ever thought. But
Is it weird when your dad calls you and goes, look, you got to slow down on Twitter. You're getting carried away.
Yeah, well, without question. But the reality is, all in all, I think he needed to do it because it's the only way to sort of bypass, that filter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
of the
definitely.
media. Because again, I saw it, during the campaign. I'd go out, in 2016. I was like, I usually did my own thing because, like, honestly, the only place it doesn't make sense for me to be is like wherever he is. He sort of commands a presence. Like, I'm just totally superfluous at that point. It doesn't really add much value. But for some of those things, I'd be there, and then you see the mainstream media headline. It's Donald Trump said this. I go, when? They're like, well, yesterday in Michigan. I go, where? At the rally at XYZ. I'm like, well, I was there. Well, if you take minute number 1 and you take a sentence from here and you take minute number 15, then you add in sort of what he's talking about in minute number 37, and you forget everything else that he spoke about in between and the context. Yeah, he said all of those words, just not with that intention, not in that order. And I mean, I saw it happen so many times that I was like, wow. Like I said, I knew there was bias before. Hey, it's not like we're, immune to controversy. He's had more press in New York than any,
Oh my God.
any guy before him. Like, we did it with The Apprentice. I mean, hey, just with you guys alone, like how many times did they try to own me for things I'm saying on like literally, a shock jock.
It's true. We never thought we'd see you again. We're happy you're back.
But the reality, like I said, our approach is different. We don't then just, crawl up into a corner and die, which is what the other side would love you to do. They want to be able to own you and that it's over and you have no career. Like, we're like, yeah, I said it, like, congratulations, like, let's do it again.
How much of it is business too? Like the NBA reaction to China with the tweet about China and then LeBron backing up going, well, there's consequences to free speech, like when other social issues they don't seem to mind.
Yeah.
Is there non-reaction and they're backing up? Is it cowardice or is it a smart business move or is it kind of both?
It's a combination of both. Like if LeBron said, hey, I'm not going to talk about this because it's all about the money, I'd respect that.
Right.
But to talk, essentially shit about America for a couple of years now, Steve Kerr, same thing. He has all of a sudden, how about China? Oh, well, I'm not educated enough on that one. Guys, it ain't quantum physics. The atrocities of the Chinese regime, whether it be, the Muslim concentration camps, whether it be theft of our people, like, this is not something you need to educate yourselves on that much. You have no problem talking about in America where you believe that you're appeasing, your base, your audience, you're speaking to, woke culture, that's no problem. But the second, I'm not informed enough to talk about it. Like, don't be a freaking coward.
Right.
Like, at least own it. And that's the difference between Trump and all of these guys. They hit it. He owns it. He says, hey, that's what I said, 100%.
Didn't he say something about Saudi Arabia, which I actually liked, even though I hated the sentiment, but it was the most honest thing a politician ever said about Saudi Arabia. After the Khashoggi, he said, look, they're buying $100 billion worth of stuff. Like, there was an honesty in that other politicians will not use. Like,
correct. By the way, it's the same reason the other politicians are doing what they're doing. They just have to be able to go out there and pretend there's another pretense. I mean, the reality is, he is a business guy. He's running this country and trying to run this country like a business, which it should be, instead of what we've seen in the past, which is a bunch of guys who are nothing but politicians, who have no actual experience, who've never signed the front of a paycheck, who've never had people's livelihoods, their family's well-being dependent on their success every day, like my father has by being a businessman. And that's why you get the results. And by the way, you're getting those results despite unprecedented incoming, right? I mean, I think we can say objectively that no president prior to Trump has anything like this in terms of sort of incoming hatred, whether you like him or not. Give me a break.
Right.
And so he's doing those things. And, all-time low unemployment for African Americans. That didn't just magically happen. That's because of policies. That's because of eliminating regulations. That's because of the things that he did that allowed business to thrive, which allowed people to get hired. All-time low female unemployment. All-time high, African American startup businesses. All-time high female startup businesses. Like, there's not a single economic metric where we are not better off today than we were 3 years ago.
And you don't hear about that.
You don't hear about it because you're getting it, and that's the problem. And that's why he's so vocal on Twitter, and that's why I'm so vocal, because, again, when you look at it through the filter of the media, you take those stats, and you literally will talk about something that is totally irrelevant, 95% negative coverage.
I have to ask
95% negative coverage. Like, that's hard to overcome. For me, I live this stuff all day long. The average guy
it's crazy,
seeing,
by the way.
The average guy seeing 5 minutes of, we fight. That's the difference.
Yeah.
The average guy seeing 5 minutes of news a day, even if his wages are going up, which is also happening for the first time in modern history, maybe there's something wrong there. I mean, and then that's the point. I mean, they're literally trying to bias and control an election. I mean, I've spoken more about this, frankly, as it relates to social media, and this is the other thing I really cover in the book, because I was the guy yelling about this 3 years ago, the social media censorship and what they've tried to do to me, try to do to my father, and you can see it's literally a dry run setup to try to minimize the actual message from getting to people who want to hear it. When I was the most recent one was like 2 weeks ago. I literally type in my Instagram handle. Now I have 2 million followers on Instagram, and I share the name of the president of the United States with like 15, and I'm typing in my name, and we show up on like page 5 of the scroll behind like Don Trump 327Q6.
You got the shadow ban
_7 with 2 followers and 1 post. Like, come on, guys, this is bullshit.
A lot of comics have been talking about it, too, that they've been shadow banned.
Yeah.
I think it's a real thing. I have to ask you something.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about it on the show recently. You've been very close. You've been in the White House, but you're very close to the White House as the son of the president. Do you think there's a possibility that the United States government is covering up the existence of extraterrestrial life?
It's so funny.
I need to know.
Literally, it's the question I wanted to ask my father for a very long time.
Do you think there's aliens being covered up?
Well, it's one of those things. I've wanted to ask it. I'm almost too embarrassed to ask it because I'd be like, seriously, like if you get one question, like it's probably the question, but I'm sort of embarrassed admitting that. So I don't know.
Maybe you do it like casually. You go, I was on this radio show, and this Sam asked, like, do I think aliens exist? I mean, what?
Yeah, that was a stupid question. What do you think?
Yeah. But do you think so or no?
Listen, I would find it as a believer in sort of math and statistics, even though those two are now racist today. Well, you've seen those, right? I mean, that is what some are trying to convince us of. I would find it hard to believe that in a universe the size of ours and whatever's beyond that there's not something there. I don't know that there's some sort of massive cover-up. I don't know that I necessarily believe that, but I would find it hard to believe that there's not some sort of other life out there.
I feel like if there was a cover-up, you would have at least heard a whisper of it by now, no?
Probably not, but
Okay.
Well, your father seems like the type of guy, though. He seems like the type that would ask.
If he knew, he'd be like, listen, we're putting it out on Twitter. Like, we got to get this out there.
How about the JFK stuff? He wanted a lot of those documents unsealed. Like, he did certain things that
Well, that's the
He wants to
reality. I
know.
mean, he wants this stuff out in the public.
Did they unseal
good or
them or
bad or
no?
indifferent. I think he did, and he's on. But again, no different than the other stuff. What they're trying to kill him for. He's like, okay, here's the transcript. Like, we're not the ones conducting things. Hey, when they spent 2 years trying to throw me in jail for taking an unsolicited, here's the emails. Like, what? I literally put them out on Twitter myself. He did the same thing with the transcript on the Ukraine call. Like, here you go. It's literally the other side that's conducting these things with one prosecutor, one judge, one jury in the basement of Congress for 41 days. And, I hear about democracy dying in darkness, but I don't hear anyone in the Washington Post complaining about the way that's going because they're getting the end result and the narrative that they want again. So, I think his general nature is frankly to be pretty open and out there and let the people decide. But that's not necessarily the way the government has, functioned or performed.
When they come after you legally, even if you know you're not guilty, even if you're going to put your emails out, when they are threatening to come after you legally, is there a part of you that's terrified going like, there are plenty of cases where people have been innocent, where people, like the world knows they're innocent and they get locked up?
It's a great question. This is another one. I don't know if you got to this one in the book, but I talk about it a lot because, really, I was probably the number 2 target of the Mueller investigation, right? I mean, they were like, oh, we're going to get him now. And I mean, even my own lawyer's like, you can't be that vocal on Twitter. You can't attack these people. They're going to be subpoenaing you. I'm like, do you think for 1 second, like, if I went out there and was like the nicest guy in the world to Adam Schiff, like, you think for 1 second he's going to be any nicer to me? Like, even at after 3 years.
Or in your book, #full of Schiff every time his last name comes up.
And millions of dollars in legal fees. I'm literally like, they've actually come to me like, you know what, you were right. Like, you get no points for being the nice guy. So I think it's interesting because I think it's sort of the thing that Trump has taught other conservatives, which is like, it's okay to fight back. Like, you don't just have to take the loss because the other side wants you to, even when you're right. And so for this process, it was, it's sort of strange, but I guess I got a little bit of that Trump gene, which is like, hey, I'm just in the fight. Like, whatever, we're not going to. So I never thought about it in those terms, even though, I mean, you can look at very real results. Again, I was a target. You have every mainstream. He committed, I'm like, I committed treason for taking a phone call? Like, it wasn't treason for Hillary to pay foreign operatives to go into these countries and collect dirt to assemble the fake dossier that we all know is now disproven. You had 19, Robert Mueller, who was above reproach because, he was the head of the FBI and a decorated veteran. Like, I think even my liberal friends were like, they saw him testify in about 30 seconds. They were like, oh my God, this guy's just a figurehead. Like, I talk about this in the book because you could see, second question, like, Mr. Mueller, have you even read the Mueller report that you spent 2 years on and $40 million? Like, he didn't know who Fusion GPS was. And you realize, like, okay, they put him in there because he had a good track record. He was sort of above reproach because of that record, but like, he had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
He was totally used. I mean, imagine assembling a bipartisan legal team that had 19 Hillary Clinton donors on it and not a single conservative. Like, the whole thing was a sham, and you knew it was going to be from day one. But that was the nature of it. And like I said, I probably should have been more concerned about it than I was, but honestly, I didn't lose any sleep about it because I knew I was right and I knew I was going to fight and I wasn't just going to curl up in a ball and die. And again, I think that's probably, genetically, we probably have a slightly underdeveloped sense of self-preservation.
Yeah.
But that was, my response. And like I said, if you looked at me and my dad, in business before, everyone's like, Don's sort of the one that's not at all, and I probably wasn't, whether it was my hobbies or what I did, and it was backed into a corner. Like, that's when I was like, oh, those sort of genes kick in, and that's the way we handled it, and I think it worked out great.
What do you think? Like, I think when Obama said he wanted transparency, I think he meant it when he said it, and I think all of a sudden the system he gets in, and he just couldn't achieve it. What do you think? All right, once your father gets the job, he's the president now, he has the gig. What do you think is the most surprising thing for him that he's had to encounter that he thought would be doable and isn't doable? Or what has he encountered that you think has been the most shocking for him?
I won't speak for him, but I think my opinion, looking as an outsider, is sort of the amount of people who want to work in administration only to try to be subversive to it. You know what I mean? You know, like if the way I sort of look at it and what I've said, you know, I probably cover this in the book a little bit, which is, if you weren't a conspiracy theorist, sort of like, you know, believer in the deep state prior to 2016, I probably understand that. If you're not now, you're a freaking moron.
Well, speaking of conspiracy
does that
theory,
make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you, number one, do you believe there is a fake Melania? And number two, have you met her?
You know, not to my knowledge. If it's a fake Melania, it's a very good it's a very good representation. But that was the whole thing. It's, you know, you see the article. You know, Melania is being held captive. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, you know, I mean, this is the crap that we're dealing. You know, Obama didn't get headlines like that. There was no, you know,
never accusations of fake Michelle.
It was always Camelot. It was, you know, regardless of whatever it is and whatever the truth is. Like, there was never. You know, so the media went from literally being a cheerleader where even bad things were perfect to exactly the opposite. And I think people do see the hypocrisy. I mean, I think you can still be, you know, left wing and be like, okay, you know, regardless of this, I mean, I see regular people around the country. They're like, listen, I may not necessarily love everything, but like, let him do his job. Mm-hmm. You know, and when you see, again, the results, and especially the results relative to the incoming, it's sort of outstanding. I mean, like, imagine they could just, the other side, work with them a little bit, get USMCA passed, right? The renegotiation of NAFTA. NAFTA has done nothing but send American jobs abroad. It's literally allowed us to be, like, our only real export has been the American dream. We've said, he managed to negotiate that again. People said it was impossible. It's been sitting on her desk for 9 months. She won't bring it up because she knows even her people would have to vote for it. So it's that sort of, that mentality is, hey, it's good for America, it's good for our constituency, it's good for everyone, but we can't give Donald Trump even a partial win.
Right, we can't.
On this thing. So we would rather watch Americans suffer than do something that's good for them because it hurts Trump. And I mean, it's that sort of mentality for me as an American. It's disgusting, and it pisses me off.
Can you explain George and Kellyanne Conway to me? I don't understand how they fuck. I respect the fact that your father's kept her on. But her husband, I find hateable just because, like, this is your wife, and does she on some level agree with him? How do they stay married?
No,
I don't understand it.
I don't think so. But you know, listen, I'm not going to opine on people's individual relationships. But again, imagine the husband of a high-ranking left-leaning official was doing that. They'd destroy him.
Right.
You know, this would be the sex. You know, he's bitter. He didn't get a job in the administration that he wanted. She did. She's now the rock star that's out there, you know, doing a good job. And he's pissed. But, like, you know, where are the feminists, like, attacking him? No. Well, he's attacking Trump, so he gets a total pass on the fact that he's making it really tough for her to be able to do her actual job that she signed on for. You know, this is a grown woman that's deciding to do this, and she's good at it. So again, it's one of those things like, now this guy's the hero because he's part of the resistance. I mean, give me a break.
Right. I can't believe it when I see it. Like, whether or not they like, you know, James Carville and his wife, they both are opposite ends of the spectrum. There's a liberal and a Republican.
When they're publicly, and he's like so publicly against the man that her job is to publicly support. I mean, we talk about it all the time. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one.
When do you think? Because you talk about speech, and this book is, again, it's what I've read of it. It's very funny, and it's even stuff I didn't agree with. I like you. You back up your points very well, so I know exactly why he feels the way he feels. So even if you don't agree with it, you should still. It's a fun book to read, and you'll enjoy it. When did speech get away from? Even George Carlin said this in an interview. He said the censorship is coming from college campuses. He's like, I hate to say it, man. When did the left lose their kind of grasp on speech being free, and that became then a conservative strong point?
Yeah. You know, I don't know, but it's been going on for a while. And like I said, it's a slippery slope. And I think just, you know, Trump is just like the accelerant to all of that. Because again, I will go out there. Like my father said in 2016, he's like, he's got to be the president for all Americans, not just the ones that, you know, he may politically agree with. And so, I mean, even for me, when I go out there, I'll go speak on college campuses. I'll go do this. And I can assure you, there's nothing quite so intolerant as a leftist who's preaching tolerance. You can have, whether it's the Martina thing, whether it's like, you can be with someone literally 99% of the way, but if you're not that last 1%, like, you get no credit for any of it. And so, it's been a slippery slope for a while. I mean, again, I went to an Ivy League school. I'm from New York City. I have plenty of friends that are from the left side. I used to be able to put myself in their shoes. And I think hopefully that comes across in the book, which is like, we can have dialogue. You don't have to agree to be able to have a respectful conversation. I mean, I used to be able to put myself in a lot of those, left-leaning positions and argue them almost for sport. I may not necessarily agree with them, but to do that, you're not even allowed to have those conversations now. You're not allowed to, give someone a platform to speak their, other views. I spoke on a college campus a few weeks ago. I mean, actually, I didn't know whether to be upset or impressed. There was, a young lady in the back that literally went like, ah! 45 minutes straight. Like, she didn't come out. No, I was like, I got to hire this person.
Yeah.
Like, if you could channel that energy into something productive, not like underwater basket weaving, whatever they're learning in college these days. And like, that hate can be a powerful motivator. Like, we could do something with this, but
She's clearly good at what she does.
yes. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure how
Long-form screaming.
I'm not sure how to monetize that or to pay off your college debt.
Right.
I'm trying to figure that one out. But like, how good are your opinions, and your beliefs if you're not even willing to let other people hear an alternate viewpoint? Well, make up your own mind. I'm not there to say this is the only way to believe. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong on some of these things. And the reality is, both sides are probably wrong on some things for an ideal place. I mean, I think people are generally pretty happy, in the middle. And while I've been painted alt-right and all that kind of stuff, I'm pretty, on a lot of social issues, I'm pretty sort of easygoing. I could care less,
Well, and this the problem I have with it is they won't credit them for anything. Like the al-Baghdadi killing them, that's a huge thing, that the leader of ISIS was killed, and they can't, even though if it was botched and those soldiers had died, they'd be calling him an incompetent, like the way they did Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
So the fact is, it was killed on his watch, so he should get the credit for it.
Well, and then they got the number 2 guy the next day. They don't
Yeah.
talk about that. And honestly, more importantly, I think the great juxtaposition, and because I remember, at least people on the conservative side, remember when Obama, when he got bin Laden, it was I mean, my father goes in there, I'd like to credit the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, for all of their work. Obviously, the soldiers on the ground, from Delta and the Rangers, and he credited the dog. He credited the dog, the canine unit, in the speech to the public, and then magically the soundbite becomes, it was all about Trump. I go, did you actually watch it? Like, it'd be one thing if, no one saw it and you're able to sell that thing. But like, literally, this was a national address that he did. He then gave a 45-minute, hour-long press conference, answered all of these questions, gave all the credit really to the guys on the ground getting these things done. And like, the press will still, it was, typical Trump. It was all about him. I was like, are you watching the same thing that I'm watching, or is it just a convenient soundbite?
Well, they did the same thing too with Kim Jong-un. Whereas if Obama had met with Kim Jong-un, they'd be saying, what a great diplomat. He's kind of broken this barrier a little bit. But because it's Trump, they're like, it's a photo op.
Yeah.
And it's like, for whatever reason, he still pulled something off that nobody has been able to pull off for 50 years.
This is the big part
years.
of my book, because, we can talk about economic wins. That makes sense for the business guy from New York to be able to have those. But like, that's a foreign policy win. Jim, if I have another morning where I have to watch, some guy, Trump's doing it all wrong in North Korea, and I know because I've been leading the U.S. delegation. I go, wait a minute. You've been leading the U.S. delegation for how long? Well, for about 40 years. I go, you've been leading, this is your life's work. You were a career diplomat who's been leading the U.S. delegation as it relates to North Korea. You've never even met the other guy. Why should we just believe that what's actually going on when for 40 years you've achieved literally nothing? I don't mean to knock that. He's a career public servant. That's great, but like, it's Einstein's definition of insanity. Do the same thing over and over and over and expect a different result. Like, the reality is we made no progress. Now we actually have a line. My father's not naive. He doesn't believe that this guy's a wonderful human being. He doesn't. But isn't it better to have a direct line? If the crap hits the fan one day, isn't it better to be able to pick up the phone rather than having to go through 15 layers of, And so whether we like it or not, it's actual real progress. And to not even talk about that, Obama's a hero because remember, the picture of him like looking at binoculars at the DMZ from 10 miles away. Like, hey, my father had the guts to go there and meet him face to face.
Before we wrap, because we got to get you on to your other interviews and everything. You're a very busy guy. Here's what I need to know.
Yeah, aliens, right?
Do you really
we're going back to this, aren't we?
No, I got you on the aliens. I'm good. We're done. One Melania. We got that.
Yeah, that.
Do you really think Epstein killed himself?
It's funny because this is one of those things, if whatever I say, it's a lose, right? But man, there's a lot of coincidence there.
Yes.
When I've seen, I'm not going to say yes or no, but, a guy who's there, he's magically then, within hours of being, off of suicide watch, the 2 cameras that are on him happen to go out. The 2 guards just happen to... Man, it seems like a lot of coincidence. They try to make Epstein, they tried to make it about Trump. They don't talk about like the 45 times, Clinton's at the island with him they say, well, he met Trump at a cocktail party one time. Look, we got you. I'm like, guys,
didn't your dad boot him out of the
he
place?
he was literally thrown out of Mar-a-Lago because of, some of the rumors and all of this stuff. So, and that's the problem. The news cycle, whether it's Ukraine. Like, I've been talking, like, go look at my stump speeches. Like, I've been talking about Ukraine and the corruption there and all that nonsense for like a year. You know when it got mainstream media pickup? When they could make it about Trump. Epstein, it's been a problem for a long time. This has been like a de facto thing. Whether, Matt Lauer at NBC, all these things are, they've been in the rumor. When you can somehow try to make it about Trump or when they're no longer in power to be able to do your bidding, that's when it becomes news. And so, they don't talk about those things. They only become news when you can somehow use it as a way to own Trump. And we got him. And so, it's a problem. And I think hopefully we get past that. Hopefully, and again, I think it's sort of backfiring to regular people in America who are like, okay, guys, like, you had me the first time with the hoax. This is now hoax version number 12. Like, maybe you're just full of shit.
Do you think it turns around at all? Is there anything your father can do, do you think, that will get a portion of the press to at least kind of give him some credit for something? Is there anything he can do?
No, he'll never get credit. But I think the way to handle it is, the only cure for Trump derangement syndrome is 4 more years. And I mean that, sort of funnily, but I also mean it somewhat seriously in the sense that, the mainstream media didn't get what happened in 2016. They're still trying to figure, the 3 people I talked to in my room at the New York Times, like, not one of them would vote for Trump. How did this happen? They still don't get, that mainstream America is, sick of sort of being left behind, that, they're sick of being, pandered to, but never actually delivered for. And I think that's continuing because, again, I see that. And again, I have to caveat anything I say to this point with, yes, I am the son of a billionaire from New York City. I get that. But between hunting, fishing, competitive shooting, I spend a lot of time in the Midwest and in Rust Belt. I went to, boarding school in Pennsylvania from 12 to like 18, and so while that was like, rich kid boarding school, whatever it is, like, the first girl I ever dated was from a Rust Belt town. And like, I know these families, I spent time with them. My formative years were there. So I think we have an unusually good understanding of real America, given that on paper we probably shouldn't. And, honestly, I think those people are sick of it. And, I think that shows and will continue. But again, we're not in a fair fight, between mainstream media, between the messaging that's out there, between pop culture and Hollywood. I mean, it's not that easy to get the message down through those people. By any other standard, 2020 should be over by now, but it's not because we're not in a fair fight. We're in an uphill battle. So, we'll see what happens. But I think it would be one of the great messages to actually getting back some sort of sense of normalcy, which is like, you guys got to stop this nonsense.
And the book is called Triggered, and it's really good, man. Again, I wish I would have gotten it a few days ago because the 50 pages I read on the plane were great.
It's out for everybody on Tuesday, by the way, November 5th.
This Tuesday, yeah. And
it's available for pre-sale now. It's
Amazon.
It's on Amazon, so you can get it. And I think there'd be nothing funnier than triggering the left to bringing it to number. I just want it to be number 1, just so I can, just so I can laugh, because that would drive them nuts.
And even if you're liberal, it's like you can't even disagree with a lot of the stuff it says on speech. I mean, the stuff it talks about speech and cancel culture, and the stuff I didn't agree with, I still liked how you addressed it, and it was still funny, and you still addressed it and gave a good reason as to why you felt how you felt. Mm-hmm. So if someone doesn't agree with it, well, at least you know why you're coming from the place.
Yeah, and I think I tried not to take it. There's places that you could say take it further for the outrage, but I'm not looking for outrage. I'm actually looking to have a real dialogue, and that, hopefully that comes across.
Want more Jim and Sam? Catch up with full episodes and interviews from celebrity guests anytime on demand using the SiriusXM app.